Okay, part two. So standard costing. I sort of highlight this earlier on. Is this the use of standard costing? We're making again a lot of the same thing, and typically, I actually think that this is if you're being asked to quote, give a quote, say at the beginning of the year before you start trading. Chances are that you cannot kind of wait till the end of the year before you start giving a quote. That's obvious. So in advance, you would have to come up with some kind of informed estimate, so to speak. Um, and so standard costing applies and helps. Now, this is another idea. I mean, in terms of deciding what your standards will be, and this could be standard hours, if you like, and standard price. So typically, this is the argument because in variance analysis, we typically break down variances, don't we, into labor, into oil usage, and price variances. Um, so this is just some theory, ideal, attainable, current, and basic. And I'm going to go through them very quickly, even probably just using this one page. But although I will flick through the slides, as the names do sort of appeal or tell us clearly, ideally your perfect standards where there are no breakdowns and there are no issues. And typically you can imagine that, yes, in a perfect world, you'd want this, but this is quite unusual. It isn't attainable. Attainable kind of takes into account the fact that you will need breaks and that people will, and you have to pay them for those breaks. This is the key point here. So in pure efficiency land, it might take you only 3 minutes to make something, but you don't budget for 3 minutes to make that thing. You budget plus what it is that the extra acceptable, if you like, rest time or idle time associated with the making of that product. So then that's what you budget for. So it might be 3 minutes plus, I don't know, 30 seconds, so 3.5 minutes. And that's how you budget to pay somebody, because otherwise you're wasting your time. You will notice all these inefficiencies or apparent inefficiencies when you now come to judge what they actually do with what your set what you had set the standards to be. Current standards kind of tell us this and ditch all that. You might have 1 day, 2 days where other machines are broken down. So whether you like it or not, some people imagine another worker doesn't turn up. It's part of a team, and things are just slower, just because you have all these unusual events that take place that affect the process. So, so we have current standards to kind of use as a benchmark, so to speak, to measure against. And basic standards are old standards, typically there for trend analysis. So we know we have a starting point, if you like, to measure how we're doing. So we can always sort of refer back to the very original, to the very beginning. And that's kind of the key principle. You have the slides, you can go through that, but that's kind of the key idea over there. Right, and so what we now have is this kind of gentle scenario where I mean, it's only a quick example where they sort of, you could get a little question on, um, if you like, dealing with idle time. And I mean, you'll have this as well, and this is, I believe, on page 6 of your textbook. So please, as you're doing this in line with having your textbook with you. And I mean, pause the video, read through the question. I'm just going to carry on, but you can always just pause the video and then read the question and then come back to discussion. You can even try the question without looking what I'm doing first. But ultimately, it talks about this making of sandwiches, if you like, on page 6. And it says that this guy is making sandwiches, and he's making a batch of 20 meaty spicy sandwiches or whatever. And ideally, it should take 32 minutes, ideally. It does tell you that we've observed that 8% of the sandwich making time is non-productive. Non-productive. So what I was saying earlier on, you can have this. You have this scenario where oops, sorry, doesn't like my pen. Where you have, it says 8% of the time spent making this thing. So 8% is 8 out of 100. Of course, is non-productive, and it's noted that the productive time is 32 minutes. So you've been productive here, and you've kind of, whatever, taking some time to breathe, over here. And so this is what we will now. So then you now sort of say, okay, I'm done. You think about it. You're making the sandwich, you stop a little. You're making the sandwich, you stop a little. You're making the sandwich, you stop a little. So the sum of all these little stops is what's considered idle time, which is why it must the actual idle time, sorry, the actual perfect time exists within the full time. This is just because when you now come here to try and evaluate, you're thinking, okay, so that means that 32 minutes is ultimately 92%. And so the how many minutes in effect is the how many minutes in oops, how many minutes in effect is the how many minutes in effect is the 8%, which is what we're ultimately trying to do here. And the rest is mathematics. 32 is 92. Find your however you do your maths. 32, I would typically divide my 32 by 0.92, but you make that happen, and then therefore your total time becomes 34.78. Then they then tell you that you have an additional 2 minutes of prep time, and then you have that plus that, and you arrive at that. Ultimately, the question carries on, so you know that in total for making 20 sandwiches, you need 36.7 minutes. Then it tells us that, well, you're paying £4.50 per hour. And if you're paying £4.50 per hour, right? I mean, again, it's just maths again. So if you're paying £4.50 an hour, that means that every minute you're paying £4.50 divided by 60. And we want to know what 36.7 minutes looks like. So of course, 4 blah, blah, blah. We now have 2.75, if you like. This, of course, is for the 36.78. But the question ultimately wants to know what goes on with one sandwich. So this is what we're found right now is for 20 sandwiches. So ultimately we're trying to find out what's going on for one sandwich. So we need to divide this by 20, and we have 0.137. You have my slides and you have this spreadsheet, so you can see the formula. I'll just show it you again. Here, if you click on this, you can see that that's H15 divided by 20. And there's H15 over there. We just come from there. Cool. Great. Let's carry on. Let me just see where I am in terms of timing. Sometimes I miss out so let me see, click here. Okay, right, good. So let's great, let's carry on. So that was TYU3 page 6. Please look at that. They're just I mean, you're doing questions all the time, but that's just a little thing. Okay, great. So now let's talk about fixed. I think we can hit this, we can get through this. Who knows? It doesn't really matter, but in the next 3 minutes. So this idea of fixed, flexible, and I'm going to use this page to really kind of break down what's going on here. What are we saying? We're saying that every organization, as you would expect at the beginning of its year, will have to come up with a plan. And that plan, typically in setting its budget, like any organization, every organization will typically go out there and try and find some information as to how excited people have been about its product. It will have contracts in place. So it will be able to come up with a good idea of how many units or or service units it can sell that year. And let's just assume that that's going to be 10,000 units. And again, like I say, this has come from a range of places, market research. This has come from market research or past contracts in place. The key point is we have an idea of how many we can sell. So based on how many we can sell, we then know we can now hire staff and we can now set the machinery in place, the cogs, the wheels going in order to get the production for these 10,000 units. So that's what we go out there and we now sort of signal to HR, hire us the people we need to make 10,000 units. And of course, I mean, I simplify this, but as you can imagine, this might be 10,000 units over the whole year. So the argument is we might have busy periods, not so busy periods. So that's what the planning is really about, isn't it? Yes, and that's what the planning really is about. So fixed, and so what you can end up with is this sort of semi-income statement, isn't it? You can sort of have, what your revenue is going to, what your revenue plan is going to be for the year, what your cost of sales will be, and all your other expenses, and therefore you can almost arrive at a budgeted, in effect, a budgeted income statement and a budgeted statement of financial position. Why not? And this is all done at one activity level based on, if you like, our research we've arrived at this idea of it was possibly 10,000 units, and that's really what's referred to as a fixed budget. So a fixed budget is prepared before the beginning of the budget period for a single level of activity. Cool, great, and that'll be the end of part 2.